The Kruger grasslands stretch endlessly beneath the unforgiving African sun, their golden expanse broken only by scattered acacia trees standing like ancient sentinels. During the dry season, the earth cracks into geometric patterns, and the Limpopo River slows to a sluggish trickle. Temperatures soar to 95 degrees Fahrenheit by midday, making survival a daily challenge for every living creature. This is when life fights its hardest battle against heat and scarcity. On a July morning when dawn temperatures hovered around 59 degrees, a research team from the American Wildlife Conservation Organization was conducting their annual survey of African elephant populations. Eleanor Martinez, a wildlife biologist with 28 years of field experience, led her team through their systematic observations. They had tracked dozens of herds over the years, documenting population dynamics, social structures, and behavioral patterns, but nothing in her extensive career had prepared her for what she witnessed that morning. Moving slowly across the dried grassland, a herd of approximately 20 elephants came into view. Adult females surrounded younger members in the typical protective formation. But one small figure immediately caught Dr. Martinez's attention. A young elephant calf, probably no more than 4 months old, stood among the group with a shocking difference. Where a long, flexible trunk should have extended from his face, only a short stump remained. The wound had healed over, but the absence was unmistakable. Dr. Martinez raised her binoculars, her hands trembling slightly. She had studied elephants across 3 continents, and had never seen anything like this. An elephant without a trunk surviving past infancy seemed impossible. The trunk was not just an appendage, but the very essence of elephant survival, containing over 40,000 individual muscle units capable of lifting 350 pounds, yet delicate enough to pick up a single blade of grass. Elephants used their trunks to gather food, drink water, breathe, communicate, show affection, and interact with their environment in countless ways. The research team gathered around Dr. Martinez, silent as they observed the young calf. Dr. James Robertson, the team's wildlife veterinarian, moved closer with his camera, documenting the wound from multiple angles. The other researchers began taking detailed notes, their scientific training kicking in despite their shock. That evening, around the campfire, the team debated what could have caused such an injury. Dr. Robertson examined the photographs carefully, zooming in on the healed wound. The edges were clean, almost surgical in their straightness. Nile crocodiles inhabited the waterways of Kruger, and attacks on young elephants were documented regularly. Statistics showed that between 5 and 7 elephant calves encountered crocodiles each year. While drinking, most survived thanks to the protection of adult herd members, but injuries occurred. However, the wound pattern troubled Dr. Robertson. Crocodile attacks typically left ragged, torn tissue with irregular edges. This looked different, too precise, too straight. He proposed an alternative theory that cast a darker shadow over the discovery. Wire snares. Poachers set them throughout the region to trap antelope and other game animals. These brutal devices often caught unintended victims, and an elephant calf, curious and inexperienced, could easily stumble into one. According to data from the South African National Parks Management Agency, approximately 300 wild animals suffered injuries or death from wire snares annually. The thought that human activity might have caused this calf's condition weighed heavily on the team. If poaching was responsible, did they have a moral obligation to intervene? The team named the young elephant Maverick, a fitting name for an individual who would need to chart his own unconventional path through life. As they watched him attempt to eat and drink over the following days, the severity of his situation became painfully apparent. While other elephant calves playfully swung their trunks through the tall grass, gathering vegetation with ease, Maverick had to drop to his knees, pressing his mouth directly against the ground. His attempts were clumsy and often unsuccessful. Blades of grass slipped from his lips. He struggled to grip even the most accessible vegetation. Drinking presented an even greater challenge. Elephants typically used their trunks to draw water, capable of holding up to 2 gallons in a single trunkful before transferring it to their mouths. Maverick had no such ability. He was forced to submerge his entire face into water sources, leading to frequent choking and obvious discomfort. The researchers watched as he pulled back from a waterhole, coughing and shaking his head. Dr. David Patterson, an elephant specialist who had joined the team from UC Berkeley, reviewed the observations with growing concern. He had studied elephant physiology for 15 years and understood the biological requirements for survival. An elephant calf needed to consume significant quantities of food and water daily to support rapid growth. Without a trunk, meeting these needs seemed nearly impossible. The chances of survival beyond a few weeks are extremely low, Dr. Patterson stated during an evening briefing. The physical limitations are simply too great. Even if he can find ways to eat and drink, the energy expenditure and inefficiency will likely prevent adequate nutrition. Dr. Sarah Chen, a behavior ecologist on the team, noted another troubling observation. Maverick exhibited what she called phantom trunk behavior, a neurological response similar to phantom limb syndrome in humans. The young elephant would raise his truncated stump, attempting to perform normal trunk behaviors, grasping at air before seeming to recognize his limitation. The awareness of his difference was evident in these moments. The research team faced an ethical dilemma. Conservation protocols generally discouraged human interference with natural processes. Natural selection operated without sentiment, and researchers were trained to observe rather than intervene. But was Maverick's condition natural? If humans had caused this injury through poaching activities, did that change the equation? They debated through the night. Some argued for immediate intervention, suggesting transport to a sanctuary where he could receive specialized care. Others maintained that observing his adaptation or lack thereof would provide valuable scientific data. Finally, Dr. Martinez made the decision. They would observe without intervening, at least for now. They would document Maverick's journey, whatever the outcome, contributing to scientific understanding of elephant resilience and herd dynamics. None of them suspected what would unfold in the coming months. As the days passed and the African sun continued its relentless assault on the landscape, the research team's pessimistic predictions about Maverick's survival began to shift. Instead of deteriorating, the young elephant started developing unexpected strategies. Within the first 2 weeks, observable patterns emerged that defied conventional understanding of elephant behavior. Maverick had discovered that taller grass was easier to access. Rather than struggling with ground-level vegetation, he would position himself near stands of grass that reached above his knees. Then, using a sweeping motion of his head, he would gather bunches between his lips before biting them off. The technique was slower and less efficient than trunk-assisted feeding, but it worked. Chen estimated he was consuming approximately 60% of what a typical ethical calf his age could eat. Not ideal, but sufficient to prevent starvation. For lower vegetation, Maverick developed an entirely unique posture. He would spread his front legs wide, lowering his entire body until his mouth reached ground level. The researchers had never documented this behavior in African elephants before. Martinez filmed multiple instances, knowing this footage would be significant for the scientific community. The water problem proved more complex. Initially, Maverick simply plunged his face into water sources, resulting in frequent choking episodes that left the research team anxious. But by the 3rd week, a remarkable change occurred. He began positioning himself at the water's edge more carefully, standing on slightly submerged banks that allowed him to reach the water with minimal face submersion. Even more impressive, he learned to use his front feet to dig small depressions in muddy shorelines, creating shallow pools where water collected in more accessible quantities. What we are witnessing is neurological adaptability in action, Dr. Martinez explained during a video call with colleagues back in the States. Elephant brains contain approximately 257 billion neurons, 3 times more than human brains. This neural density appears to be facilitating extraordinary adaptive learning. Maverick's brain is literally rewiring itself to compensate for the loss. But even more fascinating than Maverick's individual adaptations was how the elephant herd responded to his disability. Elephant society operates under a matriarchal structure, led by the oldest and most experienced female. These social systems are remarkably complex, comparable in many ways to primate societies, with intricate relationships, communication patterns, and cultural transmission of knowledge. The herd's matriarch, a massive female estimated at 47 years old, had distinctive crossed tusks that made her easily identifiable. The researchers designated her as Ember in their records. Ember's behavior toward Maverick showed unusual attentiveness from the very beginning. The research team documented her consistently slowing the herd's pace when Maverick struggled to keep up, sometimes delaying the group by up to 40 minutes. During the dry season, when finding water required long-distance travel, this represented a significant sacrifice. By the second month, the researchers observed something even more remarkable. Two adolescent females, whom they named Luna and Sierra, had developed a systematic approach to helping Maverick eat. They would deliberately break branches, allowing leaves to fall within his reach. They would partially uproot smaller plants, making them more accessible to his limited capabilities. This assistance occurred with striking consistency. Dr. Chen documented 37 distinct instances over a 3-week period. The pattern was too regular to be coincidental. This goes beyond instinctive care, Dr. Chen noted in her research journal. This appears to be problem-solving behavior specifically adapted to Maverick's disability. They are recognizing his limitation and actively working to accommodate it. The herd's protective strategies also evolved. Typically, elephant calves remained positioned in the center of the group during movement, surrounded by adults as defense against predators like lions and hyenas. With Maverick, this formation became more structured and deliberate. The largest females constantly positioned themselves between him and any perceived threats. When a pride of lions was spotted in the distance, the herd formed an exceptionally tight circle around Maverick, with adults using their trunks to continuously verify his position. The research team's thermal infrared cameras, set up to monitor nighttime behavior, revealed another unexpected pattern. While female elephants typically slept standing, calves usually lay down to rest. The recordings showed adult females continuously arranging themselves in a protective formation around Maverick throughout the night, with at least 2 adults remaining fully awake at all times. This represented a 30% increase in vigilance compared to typical herd patterns. Perhaps most touching was what the researchers termed compensatory social interaction. Elephants engaged in extensive trunk touching as a form of greeting, bonding, and stress relief. Without this crucial social tool, Maverick could have become isolated within the herd's social dynamics. Instead, the other elephants adapted their behavior. They initiated more physical contact with him using their bodies, allowing him to participate in social touching by using his head and mouth. He was not excluded, but rather incorporated into the social fabric through alternative means. Waterholes provided the clearest examples of cooperative behavior. When the herd reached drinking sources, adult females would create small pools in the mud using their trunks and feet, effectively making smaller, shallower collections more accessible for Maverick. In 6 documented instances, adolescent elephants waited for Maverick to finish drinking before they approached the water themselves. Considering the vital importance of water, this patience demonstrated profound social adaptation. As the dry season intensified and resources became increasingly scarce, biological imperatives typically pushed herd dynamics toward efficiency and pragmatism. Survival of the fittest operated most ruthlessly during periods of scarcity, yet the support for Maverick never wavered. The research team calculated that the herd's adaptations resulted in approximately 14% reduction in daily range and 23% increase in time spent foraging. These were significant figures considering that elephants required enormous amounts of energy. An adult could consume up to 220 pounds of vegetation daily, but nobody could have predicted what the research team discovered next during their nighttime surveillance. The 3rd month brought a crucial milestone. Maverick began gaining weight, a clear sign that his adaptive strategies and the herd's support system were succeeding. While still approximately 15% smaller than elephants his age, he had achieved a stable growth trajectory. Even more notably, stress behaviors such as head shaking and aimless pacing decreased significantly. He was adapting not just physically but psychologically. The research team expanded their monitoring by placing camera traps at strategic points along the herd's regular routes. These motion-activated cameras captured footage throughout the day and night, providing insights that daytime observation had missed. What they discovered on those recordings astonished even the most experienced researchers. On multiple occasions, adult elephants were filmed actively excavating roots and tubers, nutrient-dense food sources typically buried several inches underground. The remarkable part was not the excavation itself, which elephants performed regularly, but what happened next. The adults would leave these uncovered food sources in positions easily accessible to Maverick, almost as if they were preparing meals specifically for him. This behavior is so subtle that we completely missed it during direct observation, Dr. Martinez explained during a team meeting. They are essentially cooking for Maverick, preparing food in a way that accommodates his capabilities. This suggests a level of theory of mind, an ability to understand another individual's different perspective and needs, that we have rarely documented in non-human species. The implications were profound. Theory of mind, the capacity to recognize that others have different knowledge, beliefs, and capabilities than oneself, was considered a hallmark of advanced cognition. While evidence existed for this ability in great apes, dolphins, and a few other species, observing it so clearly in elephants, specifically directed toward accommodating a disability, was unprecedented. As the dry season finally gave way to the rainy season, new challenges emerged for Maverick. The soft, muddy ground made his adapted standing positions difficult. Kneeling to eat became treacherous on slippery surfaces. Once again, the herd demonstrated remarkable flexibility. They began spending more time on higher grasslands with firmer ground, sometimes choosing areas with less abundant vegetation in order to provide Maverick with more stable footing. Meanwhile, Maverick's body was changing in response to his unique demands. His shoulder and neck muscles developed unusually, becoming significantly stronger than those of typical elephant calves. This increased strength allowed him to perform more powerful head movements when gathering food. His lips and mouth also showed exceptional flexibility and precision, enabling him to manipulate food in ways that elephants typically reserved for their trunks. By 5 months old, Maverick began participating in relatively complex social activities with other elephant calves. While he could not engage in trunk wrestling, a common play behavior among young elephants, he adapted by using his head in many interactions. The other calves seemed to understand and accept these alternative play methods. Rather than being excluded, Maverick was integrated into the social world of elephant childhood, different but not diminished. Dr. Patterson, who had initially given Maverick such low odds of survival, found himself revising his assessment. What we are witnessing could fundamentally change our understanding of elephants, he admitted. This is not simply tolerance of a weaker member. This is comprehensive adaptive culture. The herd is not just allowing Maverick to exist alongside them. They have developed a support system that enables him to overcome his physical limitations. As the rainy season peaked, the herd moved to flooded plains where food was abundant, but terrain challenges multiplied. Shallow streams and muddy pools created obstacles for Maverick, who relied heavily on ground-level access for eating and drinking. The herd's response was telling. They adjusted their migration routes, sometimes making significant detours to use shallower crossing points that Maverick could navigate more easily. What had begun as a scientific study of a disabled individual's survival capacity had evolved into something much deeper, a comprehensive understanding of elephant society itself. The herd was not merely tolerating Maverick, they had developed a complex cultural adaptation around him, allowing him to overcome his physical limitations through collective support. This challenged long-held assumptions about natural selection and evolution. The traditional view suggested that natural selection operated primarily at the individual level, favoring traits that enhanced personal survival and reproduction. But Maverick's case, along with similar observations in other highly social species, suggested a more nuanced picture. In some cases, collective adaptations that supported all members, even those with disabilities, could provide overall benefits to the group. A herd that protected and supported all its members, that transmitted cultural knowledge about flexibility and adaptation, might actually be more resilient in the face of changing environmental conditions. By the time Maverick reached 15 months old, he had become more than just a subject of scientific study. His story had begun spreading through the conservation community, raising questions about what disability meant in the natural world, about the relationship between individual capability and community support, and about the remarkable cognitive abilities of elephants. Nobody watching Maverick could have predicted what would happen next as he continued to grow and develop. As the second dry season arrived at Kruger Reserve, Maverick, now 15 months old, had defied every initial prediction about his survival. Though still smaller than elephants his age and clearly different with his truncated trunk, he had developed an extensive repertoire of skills that enabled him not merely to survive but to thrive in his own unique way. The veterinary team conducted ultrasound examinations from a safe distance using non-invasive techniques. The scans revealed remarkable physical adaptations. Maverick's neck and shoulder muscles had developed far beyond what would be typical for an elephant his age, becoming significantly more powerful to compensate for the work his trunk would normally perform. His jaw muscles showed exceptional development, allowing him to control his mouth with extraordinary precision. What we are observing is motor neuroplasticity in action, Dr. Robertson explained. Maverick's brain has reprogrammed neural pathways that would typically control the trunk, optimizing his remaining capabilities to compensate for the loss. The elephant brain's remarkable flexibility is allowing him to essentially rewire his motor control systems. The research team had now documented over 20 distinct adaptive behaviors that Maverick had invented. One of the most impressive was his refined water-gathering method. No longer relying on simply plunging his face into water, he had perfected a technique of creating small drinking holes. He would use his body weight and hind feet to dig shallow depressions near water sources, then kneel and draw water through his lips with a sucking motion. This method allowed him to drink without submerging his nose, preventing the choking episodes that had been common in his early months. Even more remarkable was his solution to dust bathing, a crucial behavior for elephants to protect their skin from insects and the harsh sun. While typical elephants used their trunks to throw dust onto their bodies, Maverick had developed an ingenious alternative. He would roll thoroughly in dusty areas, then stand and shake his entire body vigorously, distributing the dust across his skin. This behavior demonstrated not just problem-solving ability but a deep understanding of his own bodily needs. Socially, Maverick had created unique communication strategies to compensate for the lack of trunk-based interaction. He had developed a distinctive greeting behavior, using his entire head to gently rub against the shoulders or sides of other herd members. The remarkable part was that other elephants had learned to recognize and respond to these alternative signals, often lowering their heads or turning their bodies to facilitate these interactions. We are witnessing cultural evolution in real time, Dr. Chen observed. Maverick is not just adapting to the herd. The entire herd is adapting to Maverick. This is a bidirectional process of cultural change. Maverick's influence on the herd extended beyond his mere acceptance as a member. He had become a catalyst for behavioral innovation. The research team noticed that some of the feeding techniques Maverick had developed out of necessity, particularly his head-sweeping method for gathering grass, were occasionally imitated by other elephant calves, especially during challenging conditions when traditional methods proved less effective. This suggested a potential mechanism by which adaptations could spread through elephant culture, even when they originated from disability rather than typical behavioral variation. Despite his obvious physical differences, Maverick had developed complex individual relationships within the herd. He remained particularly bonded with Luna and Sierra, the two adolescent females who had played crucial roles in his early adaptation. But he was not limited to these relationships. He had developed distinct interactions with most herd members, including the matriarch Ember, who continued to show special attentiveness to his needs. The neurological basis for Maverick's remarkable adaptability might lie in the unique structure of elephant brains. With approximately 257 billion neurons, 3 times more than human brains, elephant brains were not just large but specially organized. Their insular lobes, brain regions associated with consciousness, compassion, and social cognition, were highly developed. Recent research on elephants' cerebral cortex had revealed specialized neural structures believed to drive their complex social behavior. Elephant brains are not just big. They are specially configured, Dr. Patterson explained during a conference presentation about Maverick's case. They prioritize neural flexibility and social processing, which might explain both Maverick's individual adaptive capacity and the herd's collective response to his needs. At 18 months, the research team conducted a comprehensive study of Maverick's daily routine, recording all his activities over 5 consecutive days. The results showed that while still significantly different from typical elephants his age, Maverick had achieved remarkable stability. He consumed approximately 73% of the food intake of a normal elephant, enough to support steady if slower development. His feeding and drinking activities required about 40% more time, reflecting lower efficiency but successful compensation. He achieved 92% of necessary water intake, demonstrating particularly successful adaptation in this critical area. His social interaction patterns were nearly normal, accounting for 96% of typical elephant-calf interaction time. If you had told me a year ago that we would be recording these statistics, I would not have believed it possible, Dr. Martinez admitted. This is a testament to the adaptability of nature when supported by social structures. As research on Maverick spread through the scientific community, it sparked broader discussions about the concept of disability in the natural world. Ecologists had long observed that disabled wild animals typically did not survive past infancy, a fundamental principle of natural selection. The natural world seemed unforgiving to difference. However, Maverick's case, along with other documented examples like an orca missing a dorsal fin who remained a vital pod member, or a silverback gorilla born without one hand who achieved high social status, suggested a more complex picture. What we observe in Maverick's case is a sophisticated interaction between individual adaptability and social support, Professor Lisa Henderson, an evolutionary biologist at Stanford University, explained during a symposium on the findings. For species with complex social structures, particularly those with high cognitive abilities, adaptation can occur at both the individual and group level. This challenges simplistic interpretations of natural selection. Maverick's presence had also led to new insights into elephant culture. Like humans, elephants passed knowledge across generations, developing customs and traditions specific to individual herds. The herd's adaptation to Maverick demonstrated remarkable cultural flexibility, the ability to modify collective behavior in response to novel situations. We have observed elephants adjusting to environmental changes before, but this is fundamentally different, Dr. Chen noted. They are adapting to the specific needs of an individual herd member. This requires a completely different kind of social intelligence, one that includes recognizing individual differences and actively problem-solving to accommodate them. By the end of his 2nd year of life, Maverick reached an important milestone that demonstrated his full integration into the herd. During a territorial encounter with another elephant group, a situation that could escalate into aggressive displays and even physical confrontation, Maverick actively participated in the collective defensive behavior. He used his head and body to help fill gaps in the defensive formation, no longer a vulnerable member requiring protection but a contributor to the herd's overall security. This was a defining moment, Dr. Chen said, her voice emotional as she reviewed the footage. Maverick is not just accepted by the herd, he is contributing to the herd's collective strength in his own way. But Maverick's impact extended far beyond the scientific community and elephant conservation circles. As photographs and videos of the elephant without a trunk began appearing in media outlets and conservation publications, Maverick became a symbol of resilience that resonated across human society. Disability rights organizations began using his story to illustrate the concept of accommodation rather than remediation, the idea that instead of trying to fix differences, communities could create space for diverse ways of existing and contributing. The parallels to human experience were striking. Just as Maverick had found alternative ways to accomplish necessary tasks, just as his herd had adapted their collective behavior to support him, human societies faced ongoing questions about inclusion, accommodation, and the value of diversity. Maverick's story suggested that supporting individuals with differences was not merely an ethical choice but potentially strengthened the entire community. One of the most powerful moments came at the beginning of the second rainy season. The research team's cameras captured Maverick standing in falling rain, his head tilted upward toward the sky, allowing raindrops to fall directly into his open mouth. He appeared to be playing, almost dancing, repeatedly rising on his hind legs to catch more raindrops. There was no visible frustration or confusion about his condition, simply a young elephant experiencing joy in his own unique way. In that moment, I realized we had been thinking about Maverick wrong from the very beginning. Dr. Martinez wrote in her field journal, "We saw him as a defective creature, lacking something essential. But that is not how he experiences himself. For Maverick, this is simply life, the only life he has ever known. He is not incomplete. He is simply different." The ongoing research on Maverick continued to raise profound questions about the boundaries between instinct and learning, between biology and culture. How did an elephant brain so readily reprogram neural pathways to adapt to such a significant loss? How did an elephant herd recognize and respond to an individual's needs with such sophistication? The answers would not only deepen understanding of elephants, but potentially illuminate the capacities of all highly cognitive species, including humans. For conservationists working to protect African elephants from escalating threats like poaching, habitat loss, and human-wildlife conflict, Maverick's story provided crucial perspective. It emphasized not just the importance of protecting individual elephants, but preserving intact herds with their complex social structures. As elephant populations declined and herds became fragmented due to human activity, the very social support networks that had enabled Maverick's survival were increasingly threatened. If Maverick had been born into a smaller or fragmented herd, one disrupted by poaching or habitat loss, this story would have had a very different outcome, Dr. Robertson noted. Individual resilience depends fundamentally on community resilience. We cannot separate the two. In a world where humans constantly confronted unexpected challenges and losses, where communities grappled with questions of inclusion and difference, Maverick's story carried a powerful message. It reminded observers that resilience was not purely an individual characteristic, but also a community function, that survival and flourishing sometimes came not from overcoming adversity alone, but from adapting together. That difference did not necessarily mean deficiency. As the research team searched for the herd on yet another dawn patrol, they found Maverick standing beside the matriarch Ember on a small rise, overlooking the vast grasslands. He stood without a trunk to sample the morning air, but his head was held high, his posture strong, his eyes alert and engaged with his surroundings. He was not a survivor clinging desperately to life, but a being who had found his own path in the world, supported by a community that adapted alongside him. The team's photographer, who had documented Maverick's journey from that first shocking discovery, captured the moment. An elephant without a trunk, yet complete in every other way, standing confidently under the African dawn, surrounded by his family. The photograph would later win Wildlife Photographer of the Year, titled simply Complete. In the harsh environment of the African wilderness, where survival's laws could be cruel and unforgiving, Maverick had not so much broken the rules as revealed their flexibility, not by defying nature's limits but by demonstrating that nature was perhaps far more adaptable than scientists had imagined. His survival was not a story of extraordinarily overcoming adversity through sheer will, but a story of how evolution had prepared highly social, highly intelligent species to adapt, to be flexible, to innovate collectively in response to individual needs. The research continued. The questions multiplied. But one truth had become undeniable through months of careful observation and documentation. In the complex social world of elephants, supported by remarkable cognitive abilities and cultural transmission, even a young elephant without a trunk could not just survive, but thrive, contribute, and ultimately teach observers, both elephant and human, profound lessons about the nature of resilience, community, and belonging. As Maverick moved down the hill with his herd, beginning another day of foraging, drinking, playing, and simply being, the research team packed their equipment. They had documented something extraordinary, a case study that would be analyzed and discussed for years to come. But perhaps the most important lesson was the simplest one. Life found a way, not through individual struggle alone, but through the power of community, adaptation, and acceptance. And in a world facing unprecedented environmental and social changes, that was exactly the kind of story that everyone needed to hear. This story is more than just about survival. It's about the unbreakable bond between humans and animals, and how sometimes they don't just share our lives, they save them.